Hello everyone, my name is Josh and this is Whimsical and Interesting Musings. And today, for the second time today, let's go back inside number 9 with series 6. And let's get right into it. Let's not waste any time. The first episode of this new series is called Weathering Heist, and it is taking place in a abandoned soundstage, and it follows a group of people who are planning an elaborate heist. And it's all done with all sorts of shenanigans, including a subplot, force contrived romance, and various other things, including a double crossing arc and various other things. This particular episode is an interesting one because it's a great breakdown on a heist film or a heist series, and it follows a group of people who are just after these particular types of diamonds. If you're watching this, you will very quickly start to things will start to come to mind, like Reservoir Dogs, in the sense that it's basically a story that's about a pre-heist and a post-heist scenario, and it's a fantastic setup for a lot of fourth wall breaks, a lot of characters looking directly at the camera, including one character who is a person who may or may not be a double agent. So yeah, you can clearly tell that this particular episode might not have been the direct inspiration may not have directly garnered inspiration from Reservoir Dogs, but there definitely is a lot of seeds for that particular film to have been a direct influence in some ways, in more ways than one actually. But yeah, who cares? Quentin Tarantino famously got his inspiration for Kill Bill from a film called Lady Snowblood, so no one's perfect. There, I said it. Yeah, Quentin Tarantino does like to borrow quite a bit from other movies in order to flesh out his own worlds, but that's often the case, and it's often the case here with Inside Number 9. So yeah, this basically is a heist film with a couple of twists and turns. And the fourth wall breaking is fantastically done. I like how it's just one character to begin with, and then when the twist happens, the reversal happens, another character is addressing us directly, which I thought was such a clever idea. I love that moment where the reversal happens, and oh yeah, it's just so good, and it really kind of makes you go, oh, that was a good one, well done. And Pemberton and Shearsmith, it's fantastic. This was actually really funny as well. Like, I really love the fact that there's a romance subplot with a woman who's the daughter of the head heist manager, and then she kind of has this crush on this big, broad-shouldered guy who's very kind of dim, but he's gorgeous. And he's very dim, but he's also really gorgeous. But but he's also a guy who is gay, and he fancies one of the other heist members. And it happens to be Shearsmith, who he has a deep crush on. And I thought that was hilarious, because Shearsmith's character in this was the most goofiest guy around. And it was bloody hilarious just seeing these three people who don't really know that they like each other, or that they're aware of it liking each other, kind of go after each other, but they're actually interested in other people. It's a great Shakespearean Shakespearean farce almost. It's really funny, it's very self-aware, and this was the first episode where they actually acknowledged COVID to a certain extent, because it was all in one location, and it mostly kind of focused on a group of people, and a lot of the big action, if there is a lot of big action where a lot of things are very fast moving, it tends to have happened very much off stage, and often the recreations aren't so much done in the Ocean's 11 or the Italian Job remake style. It's more done in the style of these very clever theatrical tricks using umbrellas and various other things to kind of create the illusion of action and the illusion of forward momentum, while staying in one situation and doing things on a much more smaller scale, which was fantastic. And it is very funny as well. So if you're looking for humour and a couple of dark comedic bits, I would highly recommend this episode. That was Weathering Heist, and it was episode 1 of series 6. Moving on to Simon Says. And this episode is an interesting episode to watch because I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I immediately got Annie Wilkes vibes from Simon Shearsmith's Simon character. He is literally cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in regards to the fact that he's one of those very obsessed fans who don't like hearing the word no or isn't interested in hearing the word no, and he is absolutely fabulous at it. He really brings the creep factor to this particular character, but Shearsmith's character of Spencer Maguire is also kind of a bit of an arsehole as well. He isn't a very likable guy either. He's very kind of dismissive. He's very kind of, angsty. But their dynamic very slowly starts to get very obsessive. Like, Simon starts to make demands like, oh, would you like to come on my podcast? And I love the moment where he's like, you're what? I like when Spencer Maguire goes, what? Like, you're what? What's a podcast when it's at home? I love moments like that, and of course, when you're someone who's on the internet and you're someone who has these particular scenarios, you do want to ask people like, "Oh, do you want to be in my video or whatever?" But they'll probably just say, "What are you talking about?" And I love that. I love those little nods. But the actual show that's being addressed here kind of sounds like a Game of Thrones type scenario, and I know Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton probably haven't been asked in Game of Thrones. In fact, they're probably one of the very few British actors who haven't been asked to be in Game of Thrones. Shame on you, David Benioff and Dan Weiss. You should have actually cast them in a role. Like, they're amazing. This is probably their chance at a little bit of payback. And it's a damn deliciously good one as well. The actual show that's taking place in this universe is called The Ninth Circle. And it's to do with a lot of things like trials and combat and various other things, and references to biblical mythology and other such things. It's a very crazy sounding show, but it has a very loyal fan base, as these things often do. And Simon is the most toxic variety of fan, and he gives me a lot of Annie Wilkes vibes, if you kind of could see that. But Annie Wilkes, I had a little bit of a comfort in knowing that maybe this person doesn't exist. But honestly, when you have been on the internet and you go on stuff like Facebook and things like that, and you see these forums of how obsessive these fans can be, it's actually really terrifying how much these people actually want to take control of a person's creative vision. It doesn't matter how much these things are down to the writer and the creators. Sometimes the fans can feel a certain sense of loyalty or a certain sense of ownership over something, even after it's long gone. And take, for example, the petition to remake Series 8 of Game of Thrones. And I'm like everybody else in the world. I thought the 8th series was very underwhelming of Game of Thrones. I felt like they didn't reutilize a lot of the plot points that they'd set up very well. And I think even David Benioff and Dan Weiss kind of looked back on retrospect and thought, oh, we could probably use a little bit more time. But it wasn't even a case of they didn't have time. They literally were asked by the studio, look, we can give you more episodes, we can give you more time if you feel like you can tell this story properly and give us a proper send-off. But David Benioff and Dan Weiss were like, no, we have plenty of stuff to do in 6 episodes. We can fit everything into that limit. And I don't blame people at all for being angry for that, because they literally have plenty of opportunities. But I'm more angry at George R. R. Martin because he basically said, I can't finish the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I think that's more insulting than what David Benioff and Dan Weiss did, because at least David Benioff and Dan Weiss kind of at least wanted to be rid of Game of Thrones and shake it off. Shake it off, as Taylor Swift would say. But in the case of George R. R. Martin, it's even more insulting because so many people invested so much time in his work. And he's just like saying, I'm not going to finish it. That's it. And I just kind of think that's kind of terrible, George. You should, apologise to your fans. But yeah, I still like George R. R. Martin stuff, but I've really gone off him since making that comment, because I feel like you really have kind of got these people so invested in your world, and then you're just going to turn around to them and say, you're not doing it anymore. And I just think that's really kind of awful. but that's just me. But yeah, there's a lot of other people who might have different opinions. But yeah, I think Simon is one of those characters who we don't want to meet in real life. But Shearsmith does a really good job of kind of portraying the creepiness factor. But the twists and turns are just so wonderfully done here. I mean, I love his friend who shows up and basically says, well, the reason why we're so attached to your work is because you've basically given us something special, and you've given us a community that love each other and actually care for each other and actually do really care about the content. And if you make a work where fans fall in love with your characters and literally do fan art and do all these other things and actually actively ship certain relationships that even the main showrunners may not have foreseen, you've done a good job as a writer, and you've done a very good job as a showrunner, and I think that's a tremendous compliment. I would love to create something where tons of people are saying, you know, I love this character and your work really helped me during a dark time. I would love that if all these fans literally reacted to my work the way people did with Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and all these other, you know, great fandoms, and Kingdom Hearts. My goodness, I would love it. I would love it as a creator. I'd be so touched. I would literally be weeping like I did in Love's Great Adventure. I'd be weeping. I'd be saying thank you so much, guys, for so much love and so much support. But don't turn into Annie Wilkes. No, we don't want any Annie Wilkeses or Simons here, please. Yeah, it's a good episode. It's really dark, it's really unsettling, but it's also really funny in the very stereotypical Reece Shearsmith way. I got off on a bit of tangent about fandoms there and the 8th series of Game of Thrones, but I just did that as a process of comparison. And yeah. Moving on to Lip Service, in which a guy by the name of Felix Hughes hires a special lip reader to basically see if his wife is cheating on him. And this episode is really bizarre, but it's also kind of genius in the sense that it basically starts off as one thing where you're trying to unmask a certain deception, only to realise that there's a much more deeper deception going on behind the scenes that you may not pick up on the first time round until it all comes together at the end with the twist. And then you're kind of almost thinking, wow, that's such a great, you know, reversal. And I'd love to rewatch the episode again to get all the details. And it really does give them to you all in one go. And it manages to give them... And there are little things that I noticed throughout the episode on my second viewing of this that really could have put everything into perspective. And I thought, oh, that's actually really brilliant. That's well done, guys. And it was a genuinely good episode. It was well performed. It had a great it had me pulling on my heartstrings. It felt like the ending to this episode. Oh my god. I want to actually say what the ending is just so I can give it a comparison. But honestly, if you sticking to the theme of my last video where I compared the explanation of the twist to the psychiatrist scene in Psycho, this ending felt like the ending of Vertigo, where if you can imagine the ending of Vertigo, if you've seen it, where Kim Novak and James Stewart are on the balcony of the church, and they're having this really heated argument. It's very, dramatic, and it's very flaring. The music is swelling, the violins are going crazy, and he literally grabs hold of her and he throws her against the wall, and he's literally, leaning her out the window, and they have this moment where it looks like they're going to kiss very passionately, and then they embrace, and then you hear footsteps, and you hear the crunch of shoes on concrete, and you're immediately going, oh, who the hell's there? Who the hell's there? Like, run, like, what's going on? And then you see a silhouette, and Stuart turns around and he literally starts backing up. He literally has her in a protective pose, and he starts backing up, and then you hear Kim Novak scream, and you're like, what? And then it's revealed to be a nun. Oh, that ending in Vertigo is incredible. I love it. It's one of those endings that really made you think, wow. They do not call Alfred Hitchcock the master of suspense for nothing, because honestly, that is probably one of the most brilliant twists ever. Like, that's up there with some of the greats, along with Psycho and all the rest. But yeah, I absolutely love it, and the ending to this feels like the ending of Vertigo. So if you love Vertigo and you haven't seen this episode, please check this episode out. It's a fantastic ride. That is Lip Service, and moving on to sorry, I got a bit flushed there and a bit agitated. Got a little bit over the top there with my explanation and my descriptions of it, but it's so great. I love Vertigo. It's such a good film. The next episode is a little bit lower key. It's called Hurry Up and Wait, and it basically involves an actor by the name of James, played by Shearsmith, who is playing an extra in a television show about a real-life event in the continuity of this particular episode of a boy who went missing, a baby boy who went missing, and he hasn't been found. So they basically made a dramatisation of it, and he's an extra. And he stays in a caravan, which is meant to be a green room, which is occupied by three other people, one of whom is a very kind of eccentric, very kind of almost childlike middle-aged woman, or middle-aged woman kind of, and she has a doll, and she's very weird, and she drinks champagne, and she says things like, "It's my birthday today," and things like that. And it felt very League of Gentlemen. It felt very League of Gentlemen, like, oh yeah, we didn't burn him, kind of thing. It really reminded me of that. It was very creepy and off-putting, but then I had a big smile on my face when Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted showed up as the mum, and I thought, oh, it's Mrs. Doyle, and she's going to make a cup of tea, is she? Cup of tea, Father. Yeah, I love Father Ted. That's another show that I really love. But yeah, seeing these actors in it, and of course Shearsmith plays basically the Jim Royal type slob, sorry. He basically is a guy who works very hard, he loves to spend so much time on the toilet, and he's just really gross, but he plays it so well. And this episode is really funny in just how awkward it is, and how they take a very dark subject, which is the disappearance of a child and the potential murder of a child, and they use it as window dressing for all these very quirky characters and all these very weird scenarios. And I thought this was very, funny and really, engaging, despite the very horrific and very, serious subject matter. And it was really funny, and the twist was really funny too. It was really great too. It really kind of kept me on the edge of my seat, even though it was kind of something that, oh, we're going to do this, are they? Like, but it was still enjoyable to see unravel, because it was at the very tail end. And big miracle, nothing really horrible happens to the main character, which is kind of wonderful to me. And yeah, it's a really fantastic episode. It's really funny, and I would highly recommend it. The next episode is How Do You Plea, and this stars Shearsmith, who is working alongside Sir Derek Jacobi, who was in the third series of Inside Number 9. He was in the very first episode, called The Devil of Christmas, but he had a voiceover role in that particular episode. But here he actually stars in the episode proper, and he plays a barrister called D. Webster, and he is knocking on death's door, literally, and he is being overseen by his nurse named Bedford, played by Shearsmith, and they just have a nice chat about all the various cases they did, all the various backstories, all the various secrets that these two have. And there's even a incident where Bedford, the carer, shares a story about where he got the idea to, want to become a nurse because he saved a friend's life from choking on an orange, and he said that he was very horrifically bullied at school, and he saved this kid's life from choking on an orange, and it's all really wonderful and all really fantastic. And then the twist happens, and given the name of the character Derek Jacobi is playing, I could kind of guess what the twist was going to be, but I didn't expect the twist to be the supernatural episode to be this early on in the episode, because usually the supernatural themed episode is usually the 6th episode. That's usually their last hurrah before the series ends. But this one, they actually do it in the reverse. They actually do a supernatural episode in the penultimate episode, which kind of sets up this dichotomy of good and evil, which kind of comes into play in the next episode on this list. But this was a good episode, even though I could kind of guess where it was going to go and what's going to happen. I didn't expect that final reversal, that final switch, but I did kind of think, oh, that's not surprising that this particular storyline is at play here, given that one of the characters' names is called D. Webster. And if you know of a famous legend called Someone and Someone with the name of D. Webster, you will know pretty much where this is going. So it is very predictable in that sense, but that final switcheroo is just fantastic. I mean, I love how when you think you know where it's going to go, Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton will always throw in a final twist that re-fools you, and they do a really good job of making you think, oh, well, you know where this is going, but then they'll always throw in a final jab at the end that make you go, oh, like that got me. That really kind of was bravo. Shearsmith and Pemberton, that's fantastic. But yeah, this was a great episode. Derek Jacobi is wonderful in it. He does a very good job of playing this very grumpy at death's door kind of character, but he also has a very playful side to him as well, kind of like the director in The Devil of Christmas. But yeah, Derek Jacobi is always a legend in regards to acting. He does a very good job in everything that he's in, and this was a fantastic episode. I'd highly recommend it. The last episode of this particular series is called The Last Night at the Proms, and this episode, if you're not British, you will not know what the Proms basically is. It's basically an entire celebration of British culture through the means of classical music. They'll play things like, Jerusalem and various other, musical pieces to kind of commemorate the Britishness of being British. And it's a very insane premise, but you can kind of tell with this particular episode that they were starting to play the COVID card with a lot of this, where it was all kind of in this very contained area. And yeah, this episode is very weird because it starts off very simply that these people are just basically having the celebration, watching the night of the proms, and they're celebrating their Britishness, but then it turns into a farce involving the potential reincarnation of Jesus. And when I found out that Jesus might be in this episode or in some way involved in this episode, I thought that's quite an interesting twist, because the first episode involved Mephistopheles, the devil, and the end episode featured Jesus, and I thought that was actually very interesting. They played a little bit of a good and evil type, card with the last two episodes, which is why they did it in the reverse. But I thought this was a really interesting episode. It was really funny. It was really absurd. It felt like John Waters directed this episode with all the insane hijinks and all the craziness going on, especially at the end when the guy who's supposed to be the reincarnation of Jesus just shows up at their door, and it's like, oh yeah, that they are really in love with him. The wife, see, Shearsmith's wife, who's just kind of like this very defeated and very deflated housewife, immediately sees him and is like, oh, my Lord and Saviour, you've come to help us. And it's like, oh. It's insane. It's really bonkers, but it's really kind of fun, and it's just such a great way of ending a series, to end it on a much more, I don't really want to say lighter note, because it still ends in pretty much a grim way with this supposed innocent man. Whether you think he's the reincarnation of Jesus or not, he still is just this innocent man who just kind of ends up in this weird situation where the stupid rich white people end up, killing him. Harassing him and killing him, and it just really kind of feels weird. It feels like, if this was done in America, you can tell that would be the Firefly family right away, or the Sawyer family from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, it's just that kind of insanity, and I was here for it. I was really here for it, and I loved it. But I like the fact that the ending kind of was a little bit happier, because I don't really want to say too much. I'm really giving a lot away this time round. I'm really off my game. But yes, I really did like this episode. It was just a really fun way of capping off the series. And if you really are interested in any of these episodes, it really is a great watch. I mean, none of these episodes are really one and the same, or you can never really accuse Inside Number 9 of running out of ideas, because when you think they have, they'll always bring back something. They'll always bring up something that always makes you go, wow, I did not expect them to go in that direction. But this was a good one, especially with the last 2 episodes of Series 6. They really did a great job of doing that reverse sort of, playing with sort of dichotomy of good and evil. It's a really interesting idea, or heaven and hell and all these other things. And I just really like that. That was a nice twist and a nice change up of proceedings. And now I want to get on to recording Series 7. So I'm going to stop recording here, and I'm going to go jump straight into Series 7 of Inside Number 9. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and be sure to subscribe for more videos. Have a great day all, and take care.